All right, the big questions that we ask at the back of that development, which we saw take place over the course of the weekend. What is President Trump's plan for Venezuela? Is Trump planning more invasions? Is Venezuela raid all about oil? And how will China respond? Let's take these questions to K.C. Singh, former Indian ambassador, Dr. Taimur Baig, managing director and chief economist, DBS Bank Limited, Daniel Freed, former diplomat and Weiser Family Distinguished Fellow at the Atlantic Council. Let's cut across to Mr. Freed first. Mr. Freed, what is your reading of what transpired in the last 48 hours, sir?
We are dealing with a legally and constitutionally questionable U.S. move. Deposing Maduro, however, could find some measure of vindication if what replaces it is democracy, stability, and renewed prosperity for the Venezuelan people. That was more or less the result of the U.S. invasion of Panama in 1989. But whether U.S. policy is headed in that direction, I can't say. President Trump has spoken of the U.S. running Venezuela. Secretary Rubio has backed away from that. The United States seems to have little interest in a democratic transition to the Venezuelan opposition, which won the last election by all accounts. Instead, the U.S. seems to be counting on some sort of arrangement with the rest of the Maduro regime, which is still in power. So a great deal of uncertainty, and the U.S. is staring into a dark room, and it is not clear to me what's at the other side.
I want to bring in K.C. Singh as well. Ambassador Singh, when you look at the developments and India's response, to say it's very, very measured concern, but not condemnation in a fast-evolving geopolitical situation, do you think it's the prudent line to take?
Look, I think there are many legal elements to it, but I think there are three basic ways, three basic reasons how you can, or justification, you can intervene and go and grab somebody from another country. One is you have the UN Security Council approval, which they don't have in this case. Second is the other country approves, which they didn't because you grabbed the president. And the third is that you say self-defense. Now, US is not talking of they're using self-defense, saying drugs were coming to us and drugs are killing people in America, and hence it is self-defense to go and get him. Now, that itself is questionable because fentanyl is really not coming from Venezuela. And then the reasons given by US, they go on varying. The Southern Command Chief, General Lady, she said, no, it's got nothing to do with democracy. It's got to do with oil, it's got to do with minerals. So you're getting different arguments from different people. You got the European Commission, 26 countries have signed a statement. And they've said, we are not for Maduro. We think there should be an orderly transition to a popularly elected. Not do it. You can't use illegal means to do it. So there is a debate. In fact, UN Security Council is probably meeting as we discuss this. They're meeting today. And this will be brought up by China and by other countries and by Russia, the permanent members, and probably even England and France. The French have taken a position on this. And then what has happened is, I think the danger is that President Trump is feeling so emboldened by this, that he's threatening Colombia, then he's threatening Greenland, then he's back to, again, many of Cuba. So he's threatening all those. So he is saying this is the Monroe Doctrine of the 19th century, and we can intervene wherever we want. Now, what nobody has told him is the Monroe Doctrine was because the countries in Latin America had attained independence from Portugal and Spain. So the American president was saying, no, don't intervene in their independence. They were not saying, don't come to Latin America to trade. Now, that argument has been taken by President Trump. He's calling it the Monroe Doctrine. And that means that he can intervene wherever he wants. And anything which is there in Latin America, South America, Central America, they will intervene and they will grab it. And this is really something going back to colonial times, 19th century. I think it's going to lead to international debate. And particularly if he steps in on Greenland, I think it causes a serious problem between NATO and US. There would be a very wide split, which can have implications. We don't know where this is headed. Also, we don't know wherever Americans have intervened in the past, the result has not been very good. Whether Afghanistan, no, it was Iraq. They were not able to bring democracy. And in this case, the final point that the ones who won the election, which was Gonzalez and the Nobel Prize winner Machado, they've been dumped by America. Now, if you want to take, the dictator out, then call those people in and have a transition to an actually elected government, which won the last election. So all that has been sidelined. They've cut a deal with the current president, Rodriguez, and I think they're trying to see if they can get control of oil, control of the minerals, and that is what this whole game is about. I don't think there's a stable path available.
Fair point. So, Dr. Beg, less about taking a dictator out, more about the fact that Venezuela accounts for 20% of the world's oil produce, and the U.S. military intervention was more about oil than anything else.
Well, the U.S. oil refineries, particularly in the South, are equipped to deal with what is known as extra heavy crude that Venezuela produces. Very few countries in the world in that crude, and their refineries are not equipped to deal with that. So in a way, you could argue that this is tailor-made for oil refineries in southern United States. But mind you, none of these oil that Donald Trump covets are going to be in the pipeline anytime soon. Venezuela has a fairly dilapidated oil production infrastructure, ruined by decades of sanctions. It produces about 1 million barrels a day, which really does not make any difference in the global oil output picture, less than 1% of global output. No countries in the world that really depends heavily on Venezuelan oil, including that China. And therefore, it doesn't have major systemic implications for the oil market, for oil production, or oil price for that matter. Unless the US Congress comes up with a legal framework, it'll be actually very hard for US oil companies also to start devoting billions of dollars of investments in Venezuela, because what happens when around and there are beliefs that this entire adventure was done on the premises. So I think that there's very well economic reasoning behind this, although it is the easy sell. It's about oil and we're going to seize it. But when we look at the fundamentals of the economy of Venezuela, it does not look like a very persuasive case.
All right. Well, the sheer fact that India also has investments in Venezuela's oil sector, do we look at this as an opportunity? We're going to come back on that question. But Daniel, Mr. Fried, I want to bring you back into this conversation. What next now? Because there's talk of Greenland, there's talk of Iran. As a former diplomat, how do you look at it? What would be the next target?
President Trump likes to keep other Americans and other countries off balance. He likes to threaten. He likes to brag. It is not clear to me that Trump is going to act quickly against any of these countries. His political base voted for him because he promised to extract the United States from foreign entanglements. Now he seems to be getting back into it. The operation to seize Maduro was frankly brilliant. It was just a textbook perfect operation, very impressive. But the outcome in Venezuela is far from clear. And it may not be as easy as Trump imagines. It's easier to conduct a quick military operation than it is to help set up a country, or as Trump says, to run a country, or as Marco Rubio says, to basically intimidate the remnants of the Maduro regime into cooperating with us. It's not clear that the U.S. has a viable or any plan for Venezuela.
Okay. All right. Ambassador K.C. Singh, to get you back into this conversation, the fact is that India has, communicated to the U.S. that if it is expected to curtail its oil purchases from Russia, it must permit other markets like Venezuela. Do you see this as an opportunity? India also has investments where Venezuela's oil sector is concerned.
I don't think Venezuela is the only source, because as has just been put, for them to go up from about just under 1 million barrels a day to a higher production level, the highest was 3 or 4 million couple of decades ago, it's going to take a long time because they don't have the pipelines. It's a very heavy crude. It's very difficult to pull it out and then to transport it and to really develop that infrastructure. And that's assuming things remain stable within Venezuela, because don't forget the army is sulking. This was not a proper military operation. I think this was a connivance on the part of domestic forces, which allowed the president to be removed. Only most of the people killed were his personal Cuban guard. So it's a very long journey, and there are much safer places to buy oil from.
Then Venezuela.
Venezuela is not about to sell the oil on a discount.
Okay.
And there are many other, and the transportation costs.
Fair point. Dr. Beg, I'm running out of time, so I just want to quickly get in Dr. Beg for an intervention. How do you think China is going to react? Because not just a customer, it's also a big investor where Venezuela's oil industry is concerned.
So China is quite deeply entangled in the Venezuelan economy. You have perhaps more than 100,000 Chinese nationals who work in Venezuela. And of course, Chinese oil companies have substantial investments in Venezuela. If this is a way to push China out, it's going to be very problematic. I don't think that is part of President Trump's design, because I haven't really heard the word China mentioned in any of these discussions. It would actually be a very dangerous geopolitical escalation if that were to happen. Mind you, even in Iraq, after the US went ahead with this intervention, there were fears that the Chinese investment in Iraq would be under jeopardy. Actually, that didn't happen at all. In fact, once things stabilized, China actually doubled up on it. Venezuela, in my view, would probably follow a similar script. I don't think US is in there to push China out, because it's not like China has had major success in influencing a Maduro regime in any way or protecting it. The Americans went in and just abducted him just like that. So I don't think if there were any military questions we would be discussing in this particular line of reasoning, it would be very different. So I would say that as far as China is concerned, they have to watch and see. They will also say that, if your neighborhood is that sacrosanct, what about our neighborhood? Is that then our plaything?
I appreciate all three gentlemen for joining us. Thank you. We're going to keep a keen eye on all developments as they take place. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow night.